You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi everybody, it's good to be back with you again. I'm Steve Adams, or Mighty Blue, and you are listening to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Today, well, we've got a kind of shocking story to tell you. Nathan Echols is our main guest, and believe me, this guy is lucky to still be breathing, let alone having just completed an AT thru-hike in less than 70 days. His story is one of resilience, quick thinking on behalf of his wife, and an unshakable determination to carry on with his dreams. We'll hear from Nathan in a minute. Also on today, and in fact for the next few weeks, we're going to have Katie Westling, who is closing in on her AT dream, while Sarah Sunny Landis is just a couple of weeks away from our own epic summit on Katahdin. We're going to stay with these two to cheer them home. Once more this week, people have been checking in on my health, so I can share my latest update. That is, I'm not going to be fitted with a heart monitor after all. I also had the great news that I'll still be able to go on the TSX Challenge at the end of August for my fourth shot at Mount Whitney. All my tests are fine. I'm back down the gym. I have been actually since 2 days after the incident, so I'm going full steam ahead. Once again, thank you for your very kind messages. Finally today, we had the first part of Chapter 5 of George Stefanis's Then the Hail Came. George mentions a delicious stay at Elmer's in Hot Springs. Happy memories once more. And after the two women tell us their latest updates, I've got some really exciting news for you all, so please stick around for that. So let's get on. Here is Nathan Echols. I first met my guest today on Messenger when he reached out to me a couple of years ago. He was asking if I knew of anybody who had completed the AT in one season after suffering a cardiac arrest. Well, I hadn't, but I did refer to him to an old friend of mine who had a heart attack while on the trail, then came back a year later to finish it. This is Nathan Echols. Hey, Nathan, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thanks, Nathan. So that question, you were very specific about it being a cardiac arrest, not a heart attack. And I'm sure I'm the only person in the world who doesn't know the difference. So can you give me the idiot's guide, in other words, for me, what the difference is without getting too technical?
Well, cardiac arrest is the complete stoppage of blood flow throughout the body, whereas a heart attack is a restriction or a stoppage to the blood in part of the heart, which can damage some of the heart. A cardiac arrest completely stops the body. There is no pulse. There is no blood pressure. You immediately become unconscious in most cases. And it used to be death until we had defibrillators. But now with defibrillators, it's now called clinical death. So if nothing happens, if no one's there to keep your heart pumping with chest compressions, brain damage starts at about 4 minutes in.
Wow.
And death is certain to follow within 15, 20 minutes.
Well, we're going to come back to what happened to you in a second, but I want to ask you a question first, because I want to put you in context here. Because you've always been a fit bloke, haven't you?
Yes.
Give the listeners some idea of what you've been doing prior to the cardiac arrest.
Well, I've been hiking all my life. I've been hiking since I was a kid on the AT in 1974. And I went through a phase where I was running a bunch of marathons and ultra marathons. I actually completed 100 of them between 2004 and 2010,
wow,
including 4 sub-3 marathons and 14 100-mile finishes.
Jeez, how much can they be then? I had somebody once who said she did a 200-mile race.
There are some. That was beyond my capability.
But you've done over 100 miles. So how do you cope with doing 100 miles in one session? Do you do it in one session, or do you stop and sleep? Oh, right,
yeah,
okay.
No, there's no sleeping. You couldn't sleep anyway. After 70, 80 miles, you're not sleeping.
So how long does How long did it
It
take
could
you to
take
do
my
100 miles?
fastest was just over 17 hours on easy terrain, and my slowest was close to 26 hours on very tough terrain on rocky trail. So my goal was usually to try to get under 20 hours, but I did run a couple 17s,
And I
17
kind of
hours.
wanted to point out to people, you weren't some fat slob like me, just sitting around on a sofa. You were a real, proper, super fit guy, and you're a 55-year-old man as well. So not as if you're a youngster. So you really sort of kept going. But you also section hiked, didn't you,
Yes.
with your wife?
Yes, my wife and I, after I got injured from racing in 2010, and when I kind of lost my speed, I lost my interest in competing, and I went back to hiking, which I had done mostly in my 20s and the early 30s. So I came up with a plan of section hiking the whole AT, section day hiking the whole AT with my wife, and she thought it was a stupid idea. And
But do you know what? She did it, though.
she did it. She did it.
Hats off to her.
She's a better athlete than I am. She's a tough person, great core strength. She's a phenomenal woman. We started off slow. We just did a section through Sterling Forest, and I wasn't doing it progressively. I wasn't doing it from Georgia to Maine or Maine to Georgia. I just did whatever section made sense. So we started on the weekends locally. I live in New Jersey. So we did some sections of New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and eventually, as we worked our way further out towards Maine and Southwest Virginia, we started to take a whole week. And we would basically drive down, rent a car, so we'd have two cars, and we would just do a section day hike each day. And we went up to, there was a couple hikes that were over 30 miles.
Wow.
You don't, going the Smokies, you got a 30-mile section there without road.
Sure. Did she grow to love it, or was this something she just tolerated?
No, she
It's a lot
grew,
of toleration, if so.
Yeah, it is a lot of toleration. No, she grew to love it, and the feeling of accomplishment. And her daughter ended up hiking with us a couple of times and finished with us on Katahdin in 2016. My kids were involved. My daughters were involved a couple times down south. So we had friends involved as well. So it
Nice.
kind of became a group. We were the only two ones, my wife and I, who did the whole thing, but others would jump in at times, and it was a great social experience for us all.
And these are all day hikes, which is which is a bit of a clue to what's going to happen next. But before we talk about what happens next, let's talk about what actually happened to you in, I think it was June 2020. So it was in the middle of COVID, I presume.
Yes, it was.
Talk us through it. What happened?
Well, I had been, I wasn't working because COVID shut my business down. And so I had started training to do an AT supported speed hike.
Right.
And it wasn't really going that well. I was a little fatigued. I was having a little tougher time getting up hills. I wasn't as fast as I used to be. And I figured, well, I'm 53. This is the new reality. And
hang on, I want to interrupt you there. That's the second time you said you weren't as fast as you used to be. So tell us, does that bug you being slower, or is it something you
absolutely
really? Come on, man, you're getting older. Trust me, another 15 years, you're really going to feel it.
Yeah.
So that was important to you. The speed was quite important, even on hiking as well. Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
By nature, I'm competitive, and I would not have liked my younger self passing me on some of these hikes. I would have been very aggravated.
Oh, funny. So tell us what actually happened then. It wasn't going so well, yeah?
Yep. So I cut a hike short. I was out hiking with my dog out by the Delaware Water Gap. I cut a hike short to only 9 miles. We were planned on doing about 18. And I went back home, made dinner. It was a Wednesday evening, went to bed, and I didn't wake up for 2 days. And during the middle of the night at about 2:30 in the morning, I must have had a heart arrhythmia, which spiked my heart rate. And the heart is basically run by electrical impulses. And it threw the wiring off of the heart, and the heart completely shut down. And whatever noise I made when that happened woke my wife up. And it was a loud enough noise that she realized instantly something was wrong. So she got up, came around, turned the light on right here where I'm sitting right now. And she said I was gone. My eyes were gone. I wasn't breathing. There was no pulse. So she called 911, and the operator told her to get my body on the floor. She's about 100 pounds. I was probably about 175. So they told her how to do it. You have to wrap the sheet around the body, the feet of the body, and just pull. And basically your head bangs off the floor. But they need you on a harder surface to do chest compressions. You can't do chest compressions on a bed. It's not firm enough. Yeah. So she started those chest compressions. The cops were on their way. But her chest compressions, even though she wasn't CPR trained, her chest compressions, I believe, saved my brain, because the cops took 8 minutes or so to get here, and brain damage sets in at 4. So she kept the blood flowing for those critical minutes so that I did not have brain damage.
Was she aware that she'd got it moving again, or did she see signs?
No, the heart wasn't moving again. It hadn't restarted.
Oh, just the blood was going in.
Yeah, all you're doing is just simulating what the heart does, and you are sending blood flow to the organs, particularly the brain. The brain is the key.
Right. So you were still unconscious, and you woke up.
Yeah, I was unconscious.
You woke up 2 days later. Mm-hmm. What state were you in then?
I remember waking up.
Do you remember it? Do you remember it?
Yeah. No, I remember waking up, and I saw I was in a hospital, and I laughed to myself, and I said, well, something happened. I didn't know what, but something happened, because I don't remember coming here.
So what is this is something, one of my notes yesterday made me laugh, actually. You told me about your first cardiologist you spoke to.
Yeah.
Talk to us about that. That was funny.
Well, after I got out of the hospital, by the way, 2 days after I entered, they put a defibrillator into my chest. So now I have a permanent ICD, which is an internal cardio defibrillator. So if there is an arrhythmia, I will get shocks. I get 3 chances to restart my heart. There's 3 shocks in the system. And hopefully one of them will work if it happens, but it hasn't happened since. So I went to the cardiologist that had been assigned to me, because I didn't have one prior. And we did a stress test. And he's like, well, the blood flow is pretty good. We're going to take a strong statin, and we'll give it a couple years and see if some of the blockages reduce. I heard a couple years, and I'm like, I don't have a couple years to not do anything. I don't have that time. And I said, well, what about exercise? And he looked at me and said, you need to limit yourself to 60 minutes of exercise. And I looked at him and I said, per hour, you mean, right? Because per day, that's not going to work. So but unfortunately he meant per day, and I got a different cardiologist.
And he said you're going to kill yourself.
Yeah, I could. 60 minutes a day would not have done it for me.
So how do you work it out then? So you had to get this bad news. And I'm going to tell you, and I think you know this, I mentioned the other day, I had a bit of a heart issue the other day when my heart rate went up. Fortunately, I didn't have a cardiac arrest. But of course, I'm interested in this now more than I ever was before. So
yeah, none of us are interested in it until we have to be.
Exactly. It's a somewhat topical issue for me. So you got yourself a new cardiologist. What was his attitude towards exercising? Because cardiology, I know every doctor will tell you something different, but it's quite interesting to go from 60 minutes a day to, you can do whatever you
well, there was a big step in between there.
I know.
And that step, he wanted a more detailed stress test, which is called a PET stress test. Mm-hmm. And that showed a little more significant blockage. I had 3 blockages. One was deemed at 50%, but when he did a more detailed stress test, it came up at about 60%. And since there were 3 blockages, stenting wasn't really a good option. Mm-hmm. So that left one option, the gold standard for multiple blockages, and that's open heart triple bypass surgery, which I had 4 months after the cardiac arrest.
So you've, and once again, to put this in some sort of context, Nathan's on the show because he's just completed the Appalachian Trail as a full thru-hike in less than or just over 2 months. But we're going to talk about that hike itself. So how did you approach getting back to some sort of fitness, and certainly the fitness you needed, perhaps, with your desire to do this hike?
Yeah. Well, I've always wanted to do the hike, and I've accomplished a lot in my life with racing and climbing all the mountains and doing all that. But the hike was something I'd been wanting to do since I was a child. So that was the driving focus of everything. I woke up from the open heart surgery and that was my goal. They had told me there was a slight chance of a stroke during the open heart, and I figured
Right.
if I could see a clock, understand what the clock meant, and what time it was, that meant my brain was good. And the surgery was supposed to start at 7 a.m. When they were taking the respirator off me, I looked across after they got the respirator off, I looked across the unit at the CPACU, which is the recovery unit, and I saw the clock move from 8:59 to 9, and I said, yes, I'm good. I'm good. I know it.
Except of course it might have been PM, but it was actually AM.
It could have been a week. It could have been a week
Yeah.
later, but I assumed it was the same day, and I said to myself, "I'm good. How do I get back?" And it was I mean, you basically can't do anything. You can walk. They want you walking within a day or two after a bypass.
Yeah, sure.
So you can walk, and I kind of have a funny story with that as well. They were rounding 4 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 5 days after the surgery. They were rounding, and I was up walking on the unit. I had set my GPS, and I realized it was exactly 0.1 around the unit. So I would walk, and I would make myself do 10 laps, make myself do a mile. This was 4 days after the open heart surgery, and then the fifth day. Well, the fifth morning, I was walking, and the doctors were rounding, and they came out in front of me in the hall and headed down away from me, didn't see me. And I said, I've got to catch them. I've got to catch them. I've got to get back up to them and walk by them. And I did.
Nathan, you need a bit of treatment for this competitiveness, by the way.
So I caught up to them, and I could feel my heart racing, and I'm trying to like control my breathing because I don't want them to hear I'm out of breath.
Sure.
And I caught up to them. I got a step behind them, and I said, good morning. And there was like 3 or 4 of them. They all jumped like 1.5 feet, and I just kept on walking. And then when they got to my room to round, they didn't even come in. They just walked on by. they gave up on me.
Oh, dear. And having hiked the AT in, as you say, day hikes before and completing it with your wife,
yes.
Why was the urge so strong? Or were you just given such a green light? Or and I think sometimes we know our own bodies, don't we? And you obviously knew enough about yours, I presume. Was it that competitive nature again you really wanted to do?
No, it was really,
end to end?
It was more of a child dream. And
right.
It was more of a very narrow focus that had been my goal for years. It wasn't, I wanted to do it quickly. But it wasn't really a competitive thing. It was that romantic desire. I'm going to start in Georgia, and I'm going to walk to Maine. Now, mine was done in a different format, but it's still the same thing. You're still walking,
Sure.
2,194.3 miles.
Yeah, it's a long way, and I've seen your log, which is quite. I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. So you devised a training regimen, didn't you? Once you got out. So you had the cardiac arrest in June 2020. When did you actually start? You had the open heart surgery. When did you have that?
I had the open heart on October 26th,
right.
And I started training 5 weeks and 1 day later, December 1st, 2020.
Wow. Did you start slow or?
Yeah. No, I had to start slow. I mean, I was doing 10, 15 miles. I didn't do a 20 for a couple of months.
Wow. But you did how many? You told me you did how many miles of training in 17 months before you started?
7,800 miles. 7,800 miles in 17 months. But I was doing it full time. I have 2 dogs that I would alternate. I would take one, come back, take the other, and then go out by myself. And my wife would hike with me sometimes. Nice. So I had plenty of training partners.
And did you feel any steps back? Were there moments you thought, "Oh, this is not so good"? You
not
felt
really.
Good all the time.
No, it was a straight progression, a straight line progression up in terms of capability, and I felt better. I mean, at 55 or 54, going to 55, I felt better than I had probably since my late 30s when I was at my peak racing.
Wow, that's amazing.
So it took probably 10, 15 years off my life in a positive way, a negative way instead of the top.
Exactly. Yeah. So at the age of 55, you went for it again this year, and you started your hike May the 9th. Was there any particular reason for that? Were you trying to work out the best way to do it?
Yeah. My son was crewing me the whole time, and basically his college ended, the semester ended for him May 6th. He's in Atlanta. So I picked him up and had a day or two with my 3 kids because my daughter flew in from LA, to meet with all of us. And then I started on that Monday. I picked him up on Saturday, and then we started up on that Monday on Springer. That awful dirt road drive up there in the dark.
And you had an easy first day because you went from Springer at 6:35 a.m. to Hog Pen Gap by 7:30 that night, which is 38.2 miles. And so the logistics.
I did have very good weather, by the way. I had beautiful weather. It was cool.
Well, May to July, that's because we're recording July the 23rd. You finished 8 days ago on the 15th, didn't you? Which is quite remarkable. So what's your son's name, by the way?
Derek.
So Derek met you at Hog Pen Gap, and you made whatever arrangements you made there. Was there something that was logistically difficult to work out, or had you planned precisely where you're going to be each time? Because your mileage looks relatively consistent throughout that journey.
Everything was planned, very detailed. I had a tracker on me. We both had the Far Out app. So with the Far Out app and the tracker, he knew where I was every 10 minutes. And I had we would go over it the night before exactly where I wanted him to meet me. He knew I was doing about 3 miles an hour. He would get there early. He only missed or was late a couple times. So for a 21-year-old kid, he did a really great job.
That's a great logistical challenge for him, but really good to do as well. And I think it's a great thing to do. And then, so he obviously dropped you back at Hog Pen Gap the next day because you got out of Georgia on day 2. It took me about 10 days. Were you immediately comfortable at that pace? Because looking at the journal, you were incredibly consistent, as I say, in your mileage, weren't you?
Yeah, I wanted to be consistent. I wanted to average 40 miles a day through the base of Mount Moosilauke. And unfortunately, that second day, I had a choice. Since I was meeting at Rhodes and ending my day at Rhodes, I had a choice. I could either do about 31 to Dix Creek Gap, or I'd have to do that additional 15 with some of those nasty climbs when you get into North Carolina out of Georgia. Yeah. There are some tough climbs, especially at the end of a 46-mile day. So I got an early start, and I made good time that day. And when I got to Dix Creek sometime about 3 o'clock-ish or so, maybe 2:30. And I said, I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed a Gatorade. I'm like, I'm gone, Derek. And I just went up the trail. If you start thinking, you start making excuses for yourself. So my theory throughout the entire time was don't think.
Did you, we've talked about this a lot on the trail, the physicality of the hike, for us regular hikers, let's say, is achievable. You get it when you're on the trail, but the mental game is quite difficult. You sound incredibly strong. You sound like you have an incredibly strong mental attitude. Did that ever waver on this trip? Just
at the end. When we get into that later, when I fell up on Moosilauke, that was the only time that it wavered. Prior to that, you get tired at the end of the day, and you can get aggravated, and you can snap at your son because he was 30 seconds late to a road. But overall, no, I tried to stay in a positive frame. I've had some experience. In 2015, I did a whole day with Scott Jurek when he set the record, and I did a whole day with him in Pennsylvania, and he never seemed fazed by anything. He just did what he was told. He would go in to a road, and they would say, "Okay, you got to do 8 miles to the next road." He never showed any frustration, and we were going over some of the crappiest rocky sections there are in Pennsylvania, and he never showed anything that was negative. And I learned a lot from him that day. And of course, he's a much better athlete than I am, but the mental game on him, it was so strong.
Well, you're very obviously self-disciplined, and you understand yourself, because you said to me yesterday, you said the fastest known time just wasn't reachable for you, and you said you're just not in that league of athlete. But your plan was still 60 days, wasn't it?
Yes.
And it looks like, and I was looking through that log again today, and in 4 weeks, you were 1,136 miles into the hike, which is remarkable. And your first day off was on June 23rd, 6.5 weeks after you started, and by then you're at Moosilauke. So tell us what happened at Moosilauke, because you sent me a picture which shows what happened.
Yeah. So by the time I got I had been hiking in New Hampshire and Western Maine since like 1988. So, I'm used to climbing those mountains. But even then, the idea of going into that Moosilauke to Bigelow, 225 miles, the idea of going into it tired and fatigued was starting to weigh on me. Fortunately, I had good weather in Vermont, and Vermont was not muddy. I had really good weather. I was lucky there, but Vermont was not muddy, so I made decent time through Vermont. But I was struggling with both of my hips lifting. So anything that was really steep up was a little painful, and I had slowed down. I was going from, instead of doing 3 miles an hour, I was down to about 2.7, 2.8 per hour, which may sound still fast, but that makes your day longer. If you're going to do 40 miles and it takes you 2.7 per hour, it's going to take you another hour to do the hike.
And of course, hiking in the middle of summer, you probably had quite good long days as well, didn't you?
Yeah, no, that was part of the thing too that I wanted. That's the reason I started on. One of the reasons I started early May. I wanted as much daylight. I like starting in the dark with a headlamp because it's still kind of exciting, and there's a mystery to the woods. When you go into the woods and it's dark, there's a mystery going into the woods.
And it's frightening.
Yeah, I'm not frightened, but there's a little bit of an intrigue. And then as the noises start to come up in the woods, the birds start, you just become part of that world, and it's quite beautiful. And when you walk by all the campsites, everyone's still asleep. None of the thru hikers are awake when I was going through at between 5 and 6. Or every once in a while, someone would kind of poke their head out of a tent. But I like watching the sunrise. I don't like watching the sunset when I still have miles to go. I like watching the sunrise, though, because everything is still potential at that point. I can do anything at that point. Whereas at the end of the day,
you're pushing it a bit.
It's time to shut down.
Yeah, you're kind of pushing it. Yeah. So the fall, tell us about the fall.
Well, when I was hiking in Vermont, news came down that a day hiker was doing the Presidential Traverse when it was cold, and he ended up passing away. I think it was a 53-year-old man from Massachusetts, ended up dying on Mount Washington, and that news came across, and that kind of unnerved me too. I mean, I know a lot of people have died on Mount Washington, but this is June. This is mid-June. It's by the summer solstice and longest day of the year, and someone's dying of hypothermia. And I know Mount Washington. I know what it's capable of doing to people. But still, it unnerved me. And that, along with my hips being sore, I went up Moosilauke, and I should have backed off. I should have just said, well, let the day happen, go whatever pace you can, and just let the day happen and build into it. But I went up Moosilauke hard, aggressive. I want to get to the top. It was cold. It was foggy. The rocks were wet. And I slipped on a rock, and I was down. My knee buckled a little bit, and I was down. I hit my side of my head up against a moss-covered rock, and blood was flowing down my face.
I'm sure it was. I saw the picture.
Yeah.
I'll put it in the show notes if you don't mind as well.
That's fine. Yeah. So I'm almost to the top of the south peak of Moosilauke, and I know there's no way I'm going down the Beaver Brook Trail, the AT, going down to Kinsman Notch. I said, there's no way I'm going down that with this. Sure. And so I knew the carriage road was there, and that's an easy descent. I called my son. I said, you got to meet me at the carriage road. And so he walked up the carriage road. I went down and went to an emergency medical place to get stitches and a concussion check.
And how long did you have concussion?
No.
Right. Did that, because I found when I fell, you have to get up and keep going normally. Did it shake your confidence?
Yes, it did. Very much so.
Did it? I would have expected your mileage to have gone down around then anyway, but it went down quite considerably for a little while.
Yeah, well, it went down to zero for a couple of days.
Well, apart from the days off, yeah. So, how did you get over that? Did you just reestablish a rhythm again? Because I think a lot of it's about the rhythm of your own hike, whatever speed you're going at.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of like a dance over all those rocks, and
sure.
If you have to think about your step too much, you're in trouble. So I actually quit the trail. I kind of hugged my son and I said, it's over. And I went home, and my wife, my kids, my couple close friends were like, yeah, we understand. You're 55. You're old. You can't.
They said that deliberately, by the way.
You can't do this anymore. But I had one friend who got angry at me, and that was good. He said I was quitting.
Yeah.
And I woke up the next day and said, I'm going back.
Good for you, man. So how long were you off then?
I was off 4 full days and most of 2 others. So I only did about 5 miles before I fell, and then I had to go back up to South Peak, and I also had to get my stitches out that day. So basically, I missed most of all of 4 days and most of 2 other days. And then I had to reassess, like, how quickly could I do this? And I realized 60 wasn't possible any longer because of those days off. So I said, well, let me try for the next big number, which was 70. And also I toned it back a little bit. I mean, my goal was to go through the whole Moosilauke Notch, the whole 30 miles in one day. I ended up using a side trail and dividing that into 2 days.
Wow.
So, and I shortened it, some other hikes in Maine, trying to be a little less aggressive, a little more careful. Plus, my body was starting to wear down.
I bet it was. So at the end, you did it. You did the 2,000, as you say, 2,194.3 miles in 67 days, 4 hours and 50 minutes, averaging 2.86 miles an hour. You're a competitive guy. When you touch that sign, and we've got a great video of you, by the way, going there, but set to music, set to Beethoven's fourth movement. When you touched that sign, did you feel satisfied with that, or were you relieved it was over? What was your feeling when you touched it?
I was relieved it was over, and I wanted to get down as quick as I could to have a beer.
There you go.
I was definitely relieved it was over. I was happy. I had said to myself that no matter when I finish, I'm going to be happy with the result. I'm not going to beat myself up over, a couple of days if I don't make my fast goal. If I don't make my plan A and I have to settle for plan B, then I'm going to be happy with that, because 2 years ago I was dead.
There you go. Gives you a bit of perspective, I suspect, that 2 days, unconscious. It gives you a lot of perspective. And did you suffer any other injuries that you obviously shook off on the trail, or was that your one injury?
Yeah, just like tightness in the hips. I bruised my left hip pretty bad. The whole back of my left leg was bruised for about a week and a half. It was all black and blue. But I mean, those are things that you can walk through. I had some knee pain on my right knee, but I wore a brace for a couple of days, and that healed up. So, I mean, there's always things that are going to be hurting. The outside of my feet are still really calloused up and sore, but those are things you can walk through.
And the way in which you did the hike, did it that desire to do it for so long over a period of time, a lot of your life you'd wanted to do this hike, was that how you'd wanted to do it? Or, my experience of hiking this trail, both of my experiences were very different to yours, obviously. I couldn't have done it, and I wouldn't have wanted to have done it personally. And I'd love having people on here who don't necessarily do the traditional hike. Is there part of you that would like the traditional hike and embed yourself within the AT community?
Absolutely. Right. I think, and maybe I will backpack it someday. I've section hiked it. I've speed hiked it. Maybe I'll backpack it next. I mean, it's a beautiful thing to have your possessions and be trying to get to the next Walmart to reload.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, look, you just put everything in perspective just now by saying 2 years ago you were dead. So the fact that you're able to do this is a miracle. And I tell you, it doesn't age you. You look so bloody young. I said so yesterday. I couldn't believe how young you looked anyway, and you still do, even close up now. But I commend you on doing it. The work you've done to get yourself there is remarkable, and good for your son for backing his dad all the way through.
Yeah, he wasn't experienced at doing this, and for him to, the first week or so, I was telling him what to do, and by the end, he was outside of the trail hiking itself. He was telling me what to do, so that was pretty cool to see a 21-year-old grow up in a stressful.
Sure.
I mean, it was a stressful environment, because I was putting a lot of pressure on him. I needed 6,000 to 8,000 calories a day. I don't need excuses. I need the calories.
Yeah.
So you've got to be there. And so I did put a lot of pressure on him, but he was wonderful.
Has he got a desire to do something like this?
He did. It was kind of nice. He said, "You know what? I think I want to backpack the trail in Georgia." He lives in Georgia. So he said he wanted to try to backpack. So he took one of my pair of Hokas, and he may end up backpacking the Georgia part this fall. And maybe I'll go down and check on him and maybe crew for him.
Good, quite right too.
But he said he wanted to backpack. He said he wanted that experience. So that's wonderful.
And how are you feeling now, 8 days after the hike? Are you starting to feel better or not?
Well, I had to drive back to Jersey. Then I had to drive to Atlanta to drop my son off. Then I had to
Oh my
drive back
gosh.
to New Jersey.
Oh,
So I'm just kind of coming back now. And I walked a mile with my dogs this morning in the woods, and boy, that might have been the longest mile in a long time. I did not feel great at all. But I know that you just got to get going. You got to have another focus, and I don't know what that's going to be. People ask me what my focus is going to be now, and I say whatever my wife tells me to do.
is the right answer.
There's always the right answer,
Yeah.
That's always the right answer, even if you don't really believe it.
Yeah. Well, look, thanks for coming on, Nathan, and sharing your story. It's an epic journey, and I really appreciate you coming and talking to us about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for remembering that message I sent you 2 years ago.
Of course. Cheers then.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. Do you know what? I have rarely encountered such a determined bloke. He was crisp with his answers and really knew the story he wanted to tell. And even with that kind of tough exterior, you could really hear the emotion in his voice when he was telling us about how he had to tell his son that he thought his hike was over. I don't think those of us who haven't done this or another long-distance trail can fully understand how your emotions get so engaged in the endeavour. Nathan is a competitive, tough man, but hugging his son and his mate getting angry with him was just too much. What about his wife, eh? She's the one who kept him here and allowed him the chance to recover. The effort to do so, though, was all Nathan's. Now Katie is back on trail in Vermont. Let's catch up with her. How are you?
I'm good.
So
it's lovely here.
Is it? So where actually are you? Because it's absolutely pouring here.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think they got all their rain yesterday, and last week they said it was in the high 90s here in Vermont, and now it's like, I walked out this morning, it was 55 degrees, and right now it's in the 70s. So
that's pretty cool.
What a difference from Southwest Virginia.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure when we did. I'm obviously with things that happened recently with me. I'm not sure when we did last speak. Were you about to do McAfee Knob or not?
I did. I was on McAfee Knob.
That's
when
right.
You and I were talking.
Right. Yep. Okay.
And then I did Tinker's Cliff.
Isn't that great? I love that.
Oh, that was so beautiful.
Yeah.
So beautiful. Oh, I loved it. Walk along, get a beautiful view, eat blueberries.
I don't think I went through when there were blueberries there, so maybe I missed out on that one. And in your notes to me, you say that you've been hiking along the Blue Ridge Parkway. Isn't that called yellow blazing?
No, the paths would cross.
I know.
You'd cross. Yeah,
I know. I know.
I ran into a guy today who told me that when he did it, he walked the road.
Yeah. I know a number of people who did that as well, funnily enough.
It was too hot to walk the road.
I would think so as well.
I was there.
Yeah, I would think so. So how far did you get then before you started moved up to north?
So I got off at Glasgow.
Okay.
At whatever the road is at Glasgow. Oh, it's right over the James River.
That's right.
So
Isn't that lovely? Isn't that a lovely bridge?
Yes. Oh, yes. I crossed the James River, and then that's when I got off. So when I go back to Virginia, I'll start at the James River and walk to Rockfish Gap.
Right.
And that will be the conclusion of my hike.
Wow.
So
isn't that exciting?
It's nice because, so I have about 200 miles left now.
Wow.
So it's like now all it is me not getting injured.
There's only that bit, yeah.
That's the part I'm really trying to be sure about. And it's nice because, that's near my daughter and my family. And
that'd be special. Are somebody going to come down the trail and meet you to walk you in? They should do, shouldn't they?
Well, it's funny you say that. So they did. Two of my daughters and two of my grandchildren met me when I was coming out at the James River. And I'm not sure who's going to, they've got a lot of children. So I'm not sure who will be there. But I do know remember Hugh?
Hugh and Kerry. Hugh and Kerry Eckroth, yeah.
Kerry are going, they want to walk that last section with me. So that's really sweet. So I'm really excited about that.
They're great people. They're great people,
yeah,
I tell you. They're lovely.
They are. So we're going to walk that last section together, and hopefully some of my family will be out there as well. Up here, in Vermont, I have just, today and 2 more days, and I'm finished Vermont. It's just 3 day, a small section. And one of your listeners, Betty, I'm not going to say her last name.
Betty McEnany, yeah. Sorry.
That's it. Yeah, Betty McEnany. She is going to meet me and shuttle me back to my car. So that was really sweet.
She's so good.
Maybe
She's so
she'll
good.
come. Yeah. So it's lovely. And
how are you enjoying Vermont, and is it muddy?
It has been muddy, but not as muddy as last year when I did it and in the southern part of Vermont.
Right.
Because when I was coming southbound, when I was going northbound in the southern part of Vermont, it was very muddy. When I was coming southbound, before I jumped down to North Carolina, it was.
You're confusing the heck out of me, I tell you.
Because oh man, it's like a patchwork quilt. That is all I can think of it. It's bits and pieces here and there.
But that's what life's like. That's what life's like. Just like the same as hiking. Life is a patchwork quilt as well. So you've got this. It says you're finishing up a 34-mile section in Vermont. So is that the one that takes you across the Connecticut River into New Hampshire?
No, well before that.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, no,
right.
I'll get off at Clarendon Gorge.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a
I know.
Very
That's lovely.
Small
it's
section.
a great little walk.
I'm near yeah, it's nice. I'm having a nice time.
Yeah.
So, I'll do 10 miles today and maybe, like 12 miles or so tomorrow. And then the last day, think about it. So.
Are you looking forward to it being over or not?
You know what? I can't yet. I still have the presidentials in front of me.
Who's that?
I am going to just take that one day at a time. But I sort of figured so I'll start when I get to New Hampshire. It's going to be like Lyme, New Hampshire to Pinkham Notch. Yeah. And so I've already done the Wildcats.
Yes.
So it will be 13. I'm planning it 13 days. So I'm keeping the miles low because I think I have to, just for my own well-being.
Yes,
and I won't be able to do it.
I guess I'm hearing from people that the heat has been pretty oppressive up there. Is it generally this year that you've been back now? Have you found people have really been suffering with the heat?
Yes, certainly the ones I'd met in Virginia. The people that I've talked to out here today, a lot of long trail hikers and people who are northbound. There's a bubble just ahead and a bubble just after where I am. Right. And they said it's been hot, but they're, everybody's enjoying the cool temperatures that showed up this morning. So I'm happy it worked out that I'm here with these beautiful temperatures and,
And the people, I mean, you're now with a bunch of prospective thru-hikers this year, aren't you? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And what's their feeling now? They've got a few states to go. Are they excited about New Hampshire and Maine, or are they just nervous?
You know what? It's so different than the hikers that I met when I was in Virginia. They were the people in Virginia, they just were struggling to get out of southern Virginia. Wow. And the heat and the water struggles was real. Sure, and so they were just slogging along as the way it looked to me. Yeah. And up here, everybody, oh my gosh, you've got they come zooming past me, and I'm just like, it's, so it's exciting to see it. They, you can see that they know,
yes,
know that they're not that far.
You can smell the excitement. So, you can certainly smell something.
Yeah, you really can. You can feel it. Yeah, they're much more lighthearted.
You at the shelters at night these days, or are you staying in your tent? But you actually at shelters,
yeah.
so you're amongst these hikers. Has that been quite a good buzz in the evenings with you?
Well, no, I haven't. Out down in Virginia, I would camp at the camp near the shelters,
sure.
and stop because it'd be so hot, you'd stop for a nap at the shelter.
Yeah, damn right. Yeah.
So I would run into people there. This was my first night back out in Vermont, so I'm looking forward to seeing whether the shelters are going to be crowded, because there have been a lot of people out here. I'm just surprised.
But to be back with them, to be back with the thru-hikers who are close to the end, it's going to be exciting. I'm sure you're going to have a great experience in the next couple of days, especially doing this. Yeah. So, well, look, enjoy your week, and we'll hear from you next week. Okay.
All right, Steve. Sounds great.
Okay. Cheers then.
All right. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. I don't think I quite realised how close Katie is to the end of her patchwork thru-hike. She's made it work, and I'm so pleased that her Katahdin will be walking basically home with her family. That'll be quite an emotional day for her, won't it? Thanks this week go to recurring monthly donors Alan Troy, Jessica Diaz, Hugh Ickrath, Michelle Brown and Justin Mullins. Also, Paul Wilson and Sridhar Saraf made generous donations. Thanks to everybody for supporting the show. If you'd like to help, just head on over to hikingradionetwork.com and click on one of the donate buttons on the site. Cheers all. Now, Katie mentioned getting help from one of our listeners and donors, Betty McEnany. Betty also reached out and helped Sarah Landis in our Mighty Blue class of 2022. Here's Sarah.
Hello.
I have no idea what happened there. How are you?
All my bars disappeared. Like, I have like 2 bars, and then when you called, I went to 0. I don't know why.
That's right, guys. So you finished the whites. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Thank you.
Did you enjoy them?
I loved it. It was amazing. It was terrifying. Like, they were scary mountains sometimes. But
really? Do you think? Did it feel, because the way you've been hiking, it's been success after success. You've been happy and smiling the whole time, but it is a different level of hiking, isn't it, when you get to the whites?
Yeah, it really is. And our first day in the whites, on Mount Moosilauke, someone in our tram, like, we were all hiking together, and someone fell and twisted her ankle and had to get off trail. And like, within a few days, like, we heard of so many hikers who like fell and got injured. So like, in the whites, I just my pace just slowed down. I like went as safely and as slowly as I possibly could.
You meant to anyway, Sarah. I mean, it is a totally different level. There's that old expression they used to say: once you get to New Hampshire, you've done 80% of the miles, but only used 20% of the effort. I don't think that's quite true, because I think you prepared so well. You're 1900 miles into it, so you can do this now, don't you? And obviously, talk to me about Franconia, because you said you had perfect weather on it. I mean, that must have been the best thing.
Yeah, and it really was it was a really amazing day on trail, just like emotionally, physically for me, because I visited Franconia for the first time 5 years ago.
All right.
And I remember, like, I wanted to do the Ridge Trail, but it was right when I started hiking, and I think my friend and I thought that it was going to be like too long and too challenging. So we just did like a little like hike around the park. But I woke up that morning and I had no idea we were even doing the Ridge Trail. Like, I wasn't even looking at the map, and I was just walking, and I just saw where my friend and I were hiking, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, I was here 5 years ago. And I was like, am I doing the Ridge Trail today? And I pulled out my map, and I was like, I am. And it just like made me feel, I don't know if like pride's the right word, but just like thinking like back to 5 years ago and how like inexperienced I was, and like just how much I've grown, and like as a hiker and like as a person, that like got me from there to here now. And then it was beautiful weather and I got to do this beautiful hike, and it was just an awesome feeling.
And you said in your note that it's your favorite day on the trail, and you look like every day is your favorite day on the trail in all your pictures. So I'm sure it must have been pretty special. And I know for me, once you get above tree line there, and you just look ahead as these mountains in front of you going up, and then one behind it's going higher, and it's just magnificent. It still gives me chills. Katahdin gives me chills, and so does Franconia Ridge. So, but then you said you got into Maine, and the terrain is shockingly hard.
Yes, it's like, I feel like, because there's just all this build up for the whites. Like the whites are hard, the whites are beautiful, and then like you get past them, and then it's still so hard, and there's still 4K peaks, and it's like, I thought we were done with this.
Oh
like,
no,
what's going on?
Oh no. Well, before we talk about Maine though, you did obviously the presidentials after the whites. And I found coming down from Madison to be horrendously difficult after that. Did you have the similar experience, or did you go down there in decent weather? Because if you go down there in rain, I think it's almost undoable.
No, yeah. Luckily, there was no rain. For the first time on the entire trail, we actually planned around the weather, which, in the Smokies, we hiked through the snow, like, we've never planned around the weather, but here, like, we stopped early to like avoid wind on Washington. We took an unexpected Nero to avoid a thunderstorm one day. So we had decent weather for Washington. It was cloudy on Washington, but yeah, the whole, like, that descent down with nothing but boulders for miles.
Yes, I know.
It was luckily dry, but it took a long time.
Imagine doing that in the rain, Sarah. Imagine doing that in the rain. It would be absolutely horrendous. But it was tough enough as it was. And you went through the notch and you did the arm. You found that tougher than you expected?
No, because there is so much fear mongering on the trail, and everyone's always just like, "Oh, this is the hardest thing you'll do." Like, "Oh, this is so hard." So I feel like it kind of wasn't like everything else. It's never as hard as people make it sound.
No.
And I think the climb it could not have been harder than everything else we've done, and the notch was just so much fun. Like it was a joy to do. It was long.
How many of you in the Tramley now then?
Still, well, there's just 3 of us.
Oh.
We got a couple other members back, but then, one of them twisted her ankle. So there's 3 of us.
And you go through the notch. I agree with you. It's fun. And to do it with other people makes it even more fun. I don't think I'd like to do it by myself, I must admit, because I'd be a bit concerned. But then you go up the arm, which is okay. It's not. I don't think it's that difficult at all. For me, coming down from the arm's worse on the knees.
Yeah.
Coming down Old Spec.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
now that
endless.
I did in the rain.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and that I was wearing my poncho, and it was just whipping around in the wind, and I was like, I think it's more dangerous if I'm wearing a poncho right now. So I just took it off and got completely wet, because it was kind of scary doing those climbs in the rain and the wind.
Yeah.
And it was like the whites aren't over. Like, we're still on these big dangerous climbs,
Yeah, but you know what? That's why I've always thought northbound is the way to go, because you've just said you've grown as a person, but you've also grown as a hiker, and so you've learned how to cope with stuff, haven't you? I think that the hike teaches you coping mechanisms that perhaps we didn't know we had, but we actually did have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And you say that you've probably got less than 2 weeks on trail till you finish. Are you slowing down now? You said you took a Nero and then you try to avoid certain weather things. Are you slowing down because you don't want it to be over, or are you ready for it to be over now?
So we purposely slowed down in the whites. Some of the people I'm with have like a day that they want to finish. They want to finish by August 8th. So we definitely slowed down a little bit, but we're kind of picking it right back up.
Right.
And I was just having a conversation with one of my friends, and I think actually for the first time, like with this hard terrain in Maine, I think I'm kind of ready to finish.
Right. And you want to get there safely now, don't you?
Yeah. And it's like, I'm still having a great time. I'm still enjoying myself, but it's like, you know what? This is a long hike.
Have you thought about what you're going to do when it's over?
I've thought so much. I actually just bought a car, which is exciting.
While you're on trail?
Yeah, my mom works at a dealership, so she like helped me put all the details together. But yeah, because I cut ties with everything to do the trail. Like I didn't have a job or school or anything lined up, and it's been kind of daunting now that it's coming to a close, because I feel like so many people on trail are like getting back to their jobs or going back to school, and I'm kind of just like, wow, I don't even own a car, but I just bought a car, so I feel a little good.
All you've got to do is put the fact you've done the complete Appalachian Trail on your resume. You'll be fine. Don't worry about all that.
I hope so.
You've showed some grit and determination. And as I said, all your pictures, I think, are just great. You're so joyous where you are. And I said this to Trigger, who I hiked with in 2019. I said to him, about 300 or 400 miles to go, I said, make sure you're ready for your Katahdin picture. Don't just stand on the sign and not know what to do. So think about that one as well to get yourself an epic Katahdin picture, because you're going to look at that bloody thing for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I'd like you to come on if you can next week again, and obviously the week after when you'll be finished or somewhere near when you're finished. So let's try to get together again in a week's time and see how you're getting on then.
Great job, or great, yeah. I do want to say one thing though. Shout out to Betty, who's a future 2023 thru-hiker who met me on trail, heard me on your podcast, and met me on trail to give me a whole bunch of goodies.
She's lovely.
That was really awesome. Yeah,
I've just been speaking.
Thank you.
Well, I've just been speaking to Katie, and Betty's reached out to her as well as helping her out as well. So yes, people are just so great, aren't they? They're just so damn great on here. Well, lovely. All right. Well, thanks, Betty, for all that, for helping this week's two guests. And I'll speak with you next week, Sarah, okay?
All right. Sounds good.
Cheers then. Bye.
All right. Bye.
She's already into Maine and still loving it. Though you can tell she's ready to be done. I really hope she's able to stay in the moment and remember these next 2 weeks. She may be tired and probably a bit battered, but these weeks will be some of the most memorable of her hike. And you probably thought that was strange advice when I mentioned thinking about her summit picture. Trust me, the brain fogs over when you're up there, and it will become the picture you look at probably for every day for the rest of your life. So think about it. Just before we close with George's book, I wanted to mention some exciting news. A couple of years ago, a bunch of us went to Woods Hole Hostel for a memorable weekend from Thursday through Sunday. Bruce Matson had designed a program to help hikers prepare for a long-distance trail, obviously focusing mainly on the AT. Well, we're doing it again. We're going back to Woods Hole from Thursday the 6th of October until Sunday the 9th. I'll be there. I had to miss last year. Jester will be there. Clay Bonham and Evans will be there again, as well as Paul Collins or Skunk Ape. All of us have completed the trail. In fact, several of us are multi-long distance hikers, so we have a wide range of experience to pass on to our guests. Paul is new to the team, but we'll be covering hammocks, so that's going to be fun. I haven't finalised the program yet, but I can share that for the first time, we're going to record all sessions and produce a film of the event for all participants. We may well also sell that to non-participants at some stage in the future, because there will be so much information there. So if you think that that's something you'd like to attend, maybe you're planning a big hike in 23, put the date in your diary and I'll be getting more details to you soon. Exciting stuff. Now, to close the show, George is on the way from Hot Springs to Irwin. I'll see you next week. Chapter 5, Home of Rock and Roll. Hot Springs, North Carolina to Irwin, Tennessee. Wednesday, the 25th of May, 1983, mile 267.6. Still Hot Springs. There's not much to tell about today. I remained right here in town for rest and recuperation. The wound on my right little toe is still black and filled with pus from walking around muddy shelters in bare feet. I cannot picture it ever healing until I reach Katahdin. I'm learning to live with the pain, which usually fades to a dull throb after my first 10 minutes or so of hiking each day. My brother Mike is sending an old pair of his running shoes to my mail drop in Irwin, Tennessee, which is now only 66 miles away. They will tide me over until I reach my own, which have already been sent to Damascus, Virginia. I awoke at 10 a.m, called home, ate lunch, washed my whites again, bought groceries and picked up a few items at the new Hot Springs branch of the Nantahala Outdoor Center. At the grocery store, I fulfilled the promise I had made to my stomach in the Smokies and bought a ton of food. My backpack will be very heavy, but I don't mind. I have time. There's no point in arriving in Irwin before Monday night. Post offices are closed on Sundays and will be closed on Monday for the Memorial Day holiday. I cannot pick up my package until Tuesday morning. After Irwin, it will be time for me to pick up my daily mileage. I've lost a great deal of excess weight during the 3 weeks I've been on the trail, and my body should be ready for the challenge. Dave and I had dinner at the inn tonight. Several other thru-hikers were there, most of them belonging to a group from the University of Connecticut, which is travelling quickly and lightly, thanks to the supply van following them around. They ate quickly and headed right back out on the trail in order to cover a few more miles before nightfall. The Meatless Meal was excellent, though I'm far from being a vegetarian. It consisted of a tasty soup, a salad with an exotic delicious dressing, and an entree of brown rice with tomatoes, peppers, onions and garlic. We had an interesting tea with dessert. Anyone reading this journal will be aware that this is not my usual trail town meal, but I'm always open to new culinary experiences which do not include Lipton soup or instant oatmeal. Everything was served all you can eat for $5. Elmer himself was a 1976 thru-hiker, which helps to explain why he treats us so well. After dinner, I washed my pans, water bottles and utensils until they sparkled and loaded my backpack. I petted an old, tailless black and white cat for an hour. Finally he left, and a beautiful reddish-brown dog came into the room, so I had to pet her too. They have been paying me return visits all night. I don't mind. I miss my own pets. As J.R.R. Tolkien observed, the most relaxing and pleasant moments of an adventure make for poor stories later, so I'm going to pick up my own tale tomorrow. Tonight, I'm going to read about other people's thru-hikes in a 2-volume set which Elmer has in his library called Hiking the Appalachian Trail. That should take my mind off what I'll be doing tomorrow, which is... never mind. Thursday the 26th of May, 1983, mile 278.3. I stayed up late again last night, reading that Appalachian Trail book as I lay in bed. One of the guys whose story was included mentioned Walnut Mountain Shelter and what an armpit it was, and his hike was 10 years ago. I guess that it has been Heartbreak Hotel for quite a while. I woke up, finished loading my backpack, got dressed and went downstairs to pay Elmer the $21 I owed him for 2 nights' lodging and one excellent meal. At 10 a.m. I was walking down Bridge Street with my backpack, heading out of town. I stopped at the hardware store to buy a new watch. The one model they carried was the same cheap pocket watch which I was replacing, but I needed it. Back on the street, I ran into Dave and said goodbye. He must stay in town until tomorrow to wait for a package with new hiking boots to arrive at the post office. His old ones are absolutely falling apart. He'll probably catch up to me by Irwin, as I will be going slow to avoid a long layover waiting for the post office to open on Tuesday. The Appalachian Trail made a long climb out of Hot Springs to a rock crag called Lover's Leap, which jutted out over the valley. It was very steep for about a mile, but the rest of today's hike was a cakewalk. Nevertheless, my pack was very heavy and I was slow moving. I was carrying just 5 days' worth of food, but I was carrying enormous portions. Weighing myself last night in the inn, I discovered I had lost more than 15 pounds during my first 3 weeks on the trail. I still need to lose more weight, but perhaps the present rate of loss is a little fast considering the physical demands of my journey. Slow starvation has been adversely affecting my hiking. I'm going to feast over these next 5 days. I need to keep the promise I made to my poor little stomach in the Smokies. After Lover's Leap, with its excellent view of Hot Springs, came some easy woodland hiking before the Appalachian Trail followed a gravel road for a short stretch through some very scenic meadows in a place called Mill Ridge. Years ago, those meadows used to be tobacco fields. Another stretch of easy woodland trail was followed by a moderate to easy 2-mile climb up Rich Mountain. There were excellent views from a fire tower just off the Appalachian Trail on a side path, and a spring near the summit boasted some of the best water I had tasted on the trail. It was clear and cold. Most of the water I've encountered in these southern mountains has been cloudy and somewhat stagnant. A short, sharp descent from Rich Mountain led to an easy, graded climb up Spring Mountain, and the shelter perched high up near the summit. I stopped for the night, even though it was not yet 5 o'clock, and I had covered less than 11 miles. I still have 4 full days in which to hike the remaining 55 miles to Irwin and arrive by Monday night. Since Dave was no longer with me, I was sort of looking forward to spending the night at a shelter by myself. I'd enjoyed 2 solitary nights back in Georgia, one on Frosty Mountain and one at the Old Cheese Factory campsite, but I'd been closed inside my tent for much of those nights. Shelters are open to the woods on one side, and I wanted to experience the forest night alone in one. In the hour after my arrival, 3 southbound hikers showed up one by one. One was a man from Massachusetts named Dan Smith, who had started out from southeastern Massachusetts in February, hiking south to Springer. When he gets to Springer, he's going to get a ride back up to his starting point and then hike north to Mount Katahdin to complete an Appalachian Trail thru-hike. His 2 companions were a pair of local young men out on a 10-day hike southward to the far end of the Smokies. I'm not really disappointed by their arrival. They're all good guys, and I'm sure that one of these next few days I will have my night of solitude. We all sat up late, Dan Smith and I reminiscing about the mountains of New England. We were both a little homesick for them, even though the southern Appalachians had their own beauty and charm. Maybe we were just homesick, period. I don't know. At any rate, I envy Dan. In 2 weeks he will be back there, and I will still be in Virginia. Oh well, everybody has his own trail to hike. As we talked, Dan also passed on a wealth of information on the trail between here and Massachusetts, which will be quite valuable to me later. I returned the favour, telling him about the comparatively short stretch which I have completed. It was a good night. Friday, the 27th of May, 1983, mile 295.1. I've just realised that 2 weeks ago today was Friday the 13th, and it was one of the few days during that stretch when nothing very bad happened to me. So much for superstition. It was 9:30 before I started hiking today. Tired of instant oatmeal, I had made up a batch of pancakes from some mix I had purchased in Hot Springs. They came out all right, but I'm going to need to buy some kind of a spatula if I want to keep having them. On the other hand, it was a lot of trouble to clean up. Maybe I won't bother. This day was one of the nicest of my entire life. Cool and sunny, without a cloud in the sky until late afternoon. That sky was an incredibly deep robin's egg blue. Long after I've forgotten everything else about today, I will remember that colour. The first part of the hike was a breeze, several miles of gentle downhill trail with one quick mild climb. I came into Allen Gap, where a gas station right next to the Appalachian Trail road crossing sold Coke, ice cream and other junk food. For the first time in my journey, I resisted the allure of these delicacies. A bit of self-denial which amazed even myself. All those pancakes with syrup at breakfast had filled me up, and my pack was full of munchies. The next 5 miles were constant, though well graded, uphill mostly through evergreen forests. A nice change of pace from the relentless southern jungles and a taste of northern New England. I stopped at Little Laurel Shelter, which was spotless and well maintained. Somebody had even left a mattress on the wooden floor for lucky hikers to sleep on. Had I known the place was so nice yesterday, I could have easily reached it. Oh well. Spring Mountain Shelter was pretty too, and this was a great spot for today's lunch. Following my long break, I finally started to hit my stride after a morning of mediocre progress. It was 1:30 and the day was still idyllic. A rather steep jaunt up Camp Creek Bald began the afternoon's hike. I let the lean, mean mileage machine take over and made it without a stop. Dropping my pack at the junction where the AT met the quarter-mile side trail to the summit, I made my way up to a fire tower with views every bit as excellent as those from Rich Mountain. The sky was as clear of haze as any I've seen in these misty southern mountains. There were especially nice vistas into Tennessee, views of a wide, gentle plain with a couple of solitary mountains rising in the distance from the valley floor. I took my camera out of my backpack and started firing away. Less than 2 miles later, another side trail led to white rock cliffs, from which there were more great views. The first open cliffs I can remember seeing on my entire Appalachian Trail hike overlooked a scenic valley in the North Carolina foothills. A few tiny cirrus clouds had made their way into the previously unbroken blue expanse of the sky. At about 2.5 miles past the side trail to the cliffs, the Appalachian Trail joined a jeep road, jolting my plans for tonight. When I had read about this road in the guidebook, I expected the customary long-abandoned, overgrown track. This one showed all the signs of still receiving constant use, which meant that Jerry Cabin Shelter, at which I had planned to stay, was accessible to motor vehicles. This usually means trouble for hikers attempting to sleep, and tonight was a Friday night. I had a problem. It was 6 o'clock, I'd come 15 miles today, and the next shelter was 6 miles away. 2 local guys were at Jerry Cabin when I arrived. They confirmed that other locals did come up here on weekend nights to get drunk and stoned while yelling and shooting their guns all night. I like to avoid stoned people with guns when at all possible, so I needed to make other plans. Too bad. The place was in immaculate shape despite the weekend revellers. An old man who likes hikers has adopted the place. He cleans it, leaves food and soda for hikers occasionally, and even puts out trash cans. I wish I had arrived on a weeknight. While climbing out of Hot Springs yesterday, I passed a solitary cross on the trail with a man's name and the date, 15th of April, 1983. The old man had left a shelter register at Jerry Cabin, and he wrote in the first entry that the cross was for a friend, a man in his 60s who was trying to fulfill his lifetime dream and hike the Appalachian Trail, even though he had high blood pressure and his doctor had advised him not to do it. The cross marked the spot on the trail where he died. One of the local guys was the official caretaker of the Little Laurel shelter, so I was able to tell him how much I had liked the place. He told me about a good campsite up the road 1.5 miles, and he invited me to join his friend and himself there tonight. I readily agreed. His friend was a young man of about 20 with a childlike enthusiasm for everything, accompanied by a cute little miniature mixed-breed collie. I took an immediate liking to all 3 of them. Our campsite is an old field atop a summit called Big Butt. Write your own punchline there. The old field is now overgrown with tangled thickets of second growth, and the views are no more. The kid with the collie explained to me that the United States Forest Service was in the process of bulldozing the field, after which they were going to reseed it with grass in order to make Big Butt a bald again. I would like to see the results when the job is completed. It must have been a huge field. He also told me that in a few months the USFS is going to block the Jeep Road and reroute the Appalachian Trail around the most deeply eroded parts. After I pitched my tent, he returned with his dog and asked me if I wanted to see a couple of nice views. I'd come many miles today and wanted nothing more than to lay down and rest. It was growing dark and I was hungry. Still, he was one of those persons, kind of sweet, kind of slow, who many people with slightly higher IQ levels and half the personality like to treat with condescension as if they were idiot children. I noticed that his friend was very protective of him. I'd seen many great views already today, but I said, okay. It's weird. Sometimes it almost seems as if I'm turning into some kind of nice guy on this trail. Nobody has ever accused me of being one before. The first view was from some rocks just below the field. I saw a grand mountain called Big Bald in the distance. I will be going over that in a couple of days. The second view was a half-hour walk through fading twilight from our camp, but my friend had an electric lamp with him, and to my surprise, it turned out to be worth the trek. I could see most of the west flank of the mountain on which I was standing, and that broad Tennessee plain unfolded before me once again. As we sat there and talked, darkness fell. Lights twinkled on one by one across the vast valley below. When I got back to my tent, it was pitch dark. I did not feel much like cooking. I had a cold dinner of Pop-Tarts, cheese and crackers and crawled into my sleeping bag. My flashlight is very dim and I forgot to buy batteries in Hot Spring. There is nothing more to write about tonight anyway. I hear that tomorrow is going to bring more rain. That figures. I'm approaching a 27-mile gap in the shelter system.